My honor today to introduce Raffaella Iodice, who presently serves as the head of unit for Asia, Latin America, Caribbean and Pacific, and Deputy Director of the Directorate General for European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. After serving as head of Middle East Gulf, South Asia, and Central Asia at the European Commission Development and International Cooperation Department. Born in Italy, she left her home after graduating from high school to attend the Université Libre in Brussels. Just after her final university degree in 1991, she joined the European Commission. Over the years, Raffaella has become an internationally respected specialist of development, particularly in the areas of war-torn countries and the Middle East. She's held posts in Palestine during the Second Intifada, where she was in charge of development cooperation activities and relations with the Palestinian Authority, and in Egypt, where she managed political and developmental relationships with the government. She lived in Cairo during the Tahrir Revolution, and since back to Brussels at the end of 2011, she has been actively involved in all EU activities in the region during the so-called Arab Spring. She has also served as head of unit for the Mediterranean countries, with frequent travels to Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, and Palestine, to name a few. She is now actively involved in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. She commands several languages, among them French, English, Spanish, German, Hebrew, and some Arabic. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest, Raffaella Iodice. Welcome, Raffaella.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you. So shall we start? So today, thank you again to you, Felicia, Pat, and Santa Fe World Affair. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I will try to give you an overview of the relation of the European Union with Afghanistan, but in particular about the situation today, the humanitarian needs, what we are doing, and I have to say in very close partnership also with the US, and also somehow to share, maybe in the question and answer even more, my experience in Afghanistan. I've been dealing with the country for the last few years. I was part of the team in charge of the evacuation in the airport. So I left Kabul on 27th of August. So I had this quite terrible, I have to say, experience, but absolutely challenging and interesting. And I went back in December. So let me really share a few points, but also some insights, if you wish so, on our talks with the Taliban, on what we are planning and how we respond to the worst crisis in the world ever. So if you, I will now share the slides that I prepared. Do you see them?
No.
No, okay.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
trying again.
Yeah.
It should be okay now. Good.
Yep.
So let's start with Afghanistan before the US withdrawal and the international withdrawal, I would say. When we talk about Afghanistan, sometimes those who are not too much into the subject think that the problems in Afghanistan, somehow the humanitarian situation and crisis started after August. But already before that date, the needs in Afghanistan were really high. We had to face in the country 40 years of conflict, climate adverse condition, natural disaster, floods, droughts, earthquakes, the recent COVID-19 pandemic, and other communicable disease. You have in Afghanistan polio, cholera, measles, and I have to say in the last 3-4 months, this has increased sharply. So for years now, the EU has been providing humanitarian assistance both inside Afghanistan and to the region. This humanitarian support has been coordinating with equally urgent development assistance across the country. there was a difference already from what the two, if you want, arms of the European Union, which is very similar to what the US do. We have humanitarian assistance, and before 15th of August, we were implementing and supporting NGOs under the Taliban areas, because there were the parts which were not reached by the government, and the development. As development actors, US first, but we were the second main donors. We were channeling our aid through the government structure. So already before 15th of August, we had a picture which looks like 50–70% of Afghan territory was outside urban centers, but also under Taliban control. I'm not sure that this is very clear to everybody, because the Taliban were already there and controlling a part of the country. So in that area, the government service delivery was at the minimum or non-existing, and the humanitarian access at the time was basically very reduced. We talk about areas in conflict. We had also to see a widespread corruption. Already again before 15th of August, we had a GDP contraction by 5% in 2022 due to COVID-19. And that has been the case for many other countries. Poverty increase was incredible, dropped. So poverty increase was 70% in 2020. State revenues fell by 30%. And we were already foreseeing, before the international troops withdraw, that the GDP would contract even more. When the troops were already withdrawn a few years earlier, in big part, we had already a direct effect, because our international presence was also economic vector for the people and for the population. So I would like to share here a map. If you see, we have the red areas were contested. What do I mean by contested? There were areas where fighting was ongoing. So there were moments where you had more the Republican, let's say, troops controlling the areas, the moment where the Taliban were taking over. The black was Taliban control, and the rest was under the Republican, let's say, President Ghani and the previous government control. So we were operating, main donors, in that part for the development part, and also with the government. But the rest was really only reached by humanitarian actors. It's important to think about that, because that's an element that we use in our conversation, if I can use this word, with the Taliban when we talk about accountability and other things. So already, as I was mentioning, well, before 15th of August, European Union, member states, ourselves as an institution, I work for the European Commission, and the US, UK, and Germany, and a number of other countries were very actively engaging with the former Afghan government. And we were using as main channel not only budget support, but also big programs, including the ARTF, some of you might have heard, which is a big trust fund that was put together by the World Bank. With 1.4 billion of euros for 2014-2022, Afghanistan was for us, and also I think for the US, but I'm not sure, was the largest country program that we ever financed. Again, I'm talking about big program with the government institution. At the time, we were focusing on peace, stability, and democracy, sustainable growth and jobs, basic social services, and around the 70% of the portfolio was provided as on-budget aid. That's a photo we took last year in February, so it was just a few months before the withdrawal, with President Ghani, the Vice President Saleh, and well, that's me here, but this is our commissioner in charge of humanitarian aid. That day, I remember because it was my last visit to Kabul before coming back for the evacuation. We were already at the time, and this is a little bit of an insight, us and the main other actors trying to push the government to even further for a number of reforms. Anti-corruption in particular. Corruption has been quite endemic, and together with the other donors, we were already challenging, if I can say so, the government, which was not delivering on the promises to us. I do personally, and that's not, I would say, a big secret, because many of us think that this has been absolutely a mistake from their government side, because if they had so little support from the population, it was mainly also because of the unfair distribution or the corruption, which became even more evident in the last few months. And in particular, since the US already announced the withdrawal. This is, I don't know if we are recorded here, but I have to say that we could feel a kind of panic all over, and probably they didn't take into account that we were all going to withdraw eventually, and no measure really was, I don't know, taken, I don't know, seriously, or they were hoping still that some kind of miracle would happen. Anyway, we all know how it ended. So that, I would say, the last time we met President Ghani a few months before. Then what happened on 15th of August? As American citizen and as European citizen, we have been all following the drama of the evacuation at the airport of Kabul. So on 15th of August, the Taliban entered the Afghan capital, took over the presidential palace after completing a rapid takeover of the country. On the same day, President Ghani fled the country. Massive evacuation took place following the Taliban takeover. Footage circulated with scenes of chaos, panic, especially at the airport, such as people clinging on the already moving aircraft, which resulted in several deaths. Okay, I still feel emotional every time I speak about this. The photo before, by the way, was also taken by me. That's what I saw. I could see from one of the walls. This is exactly the door and the place where there was on 27 the bomb and the explosion, which killed more than 100 people, including 13 Marines. It was a terrible moment. So we were there, totally surrounded by thousands of people looking at us. Hope we had courageous people, courageous soldiers, and courageous NGOs and member states trying to get those that we could out of the country, in particular people who had worked for us. That was a common endeavor. That was a dramatic moment, but it was also, and that's why I feel bad when I hear only the bad part of it, it was a strong moment of solidarity among all of us there. But again, there it was also a moment of self-thinking for all of us. What did we achieve in these 20 years? What did we do? How did we arrive here? So we had to face that. We, at least as far as our staff was concerned, we, with a lot of difficulties and with the support of the army there, because we are civilians, but we don't have our own army, so it was US, Germans, whoever. We were really counting on the support. We managed to get out very painfully all our staff, Afghan staff, and so did many other organizations and countries. So that was, again, a dramatic moment. I wanted to share a photo here that I like. It's this one. These are the children of our staff after 25 hours in this bus when they managed to enter the airports. They were all smiley. We asked our colleagues, as you could see all the crowd there, we asked our colleagues and their families to all wear clothes, white clothes, so to try to at least recognize them. So we all, finally, after all this time and suffering, they managed to enter, and these are the children. And this is one of the meetings we had and operations that we had to prepare this evacuation in the airport. But where are we? After this, everybody was following on TV and everybody was trying to get people out, and but we had to face the reality. We can't get 39 million people out of Afghanistan. People were half of the 39 being women, children, people which are under risk of starvation, freezing in the cold, and they will go and facing a humanitarian crisis, which was, as I was mentioning, already there. But the situation of August, of course, increased the despair of the population and the economic collapse. I was mentioning before that Afghanistan was, for the European Union, the biggest portfolio. For the US, it was also a huge one, and many other countries. Basically, 70% at least of their budget was supported by international aid. So all this stopped from one day to the other. Many people left, jobs were lost, hospital collapsed, salaries have not been paid. 95% of the people today don't have enough food, 95%. And currently we are looking at 24 million people marching towards starvation. It's not a joke. When you go there and you go around, because we can still travel, by the way, to Kabul and Afghanistan, it's quite heartbreaking. Reports also of negative coping mechanism are received every day. I was with an NGO this morning, by the way, on that, but we have reports of early marriage, child labor, but also parents who sell kidneys of their children to survive, girls who are sold, and this is not going to stop if we don't at least support the population through humanitarian aid. Rampant food insecurity and malnutrition is absolutely incredible. And we also, as I was mentioning before, we see an increase of epidemic trends. That was already there, but now, of course, it's getting worse. We had, since already August, we started getting reports of cholera. We have measles, of course, and the polio vaccination, which we did together with the US and other donors finance for many years, stopped. So this has also increased the number of possible cases of polio. All these, again, without really verifiable numbers, because there are no doctors, there are no medicines. The situation is absolutely terrible. So socioeconomic vulnerabilities and humanitarian needs may only worsen. The director of World Food Programme defined Afghanistan the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. Example, quality of water is also a huge concern. 8 in 10 Afghans drink bacteriologically contaminated water. Due to the cold winter, some communities remain cut off and are only reachable by helicopters which don't exist. Protection risk for women and children are spiraling. Around 10 million of children are at risk of dropping out of school. And I think this is even an optimist number. So as European Union, together with also the other donors, but as European Unions, we have already announced in August and then afterwards in October that the EU remains committed to support the people of Afghanistan. Let me be clear, we speak about the people. There's no way that this means in any way the recognition of the Taliban government, de facto authorities, or that one penny is channeled through any Taliban institution. That's our president, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. After this announcement, at the G20 meeting, Mrs. von der Leyen announced a support of 1 billion euros for Afghanistan that mainly my unit is now implementing. So what is the difference between humanitarian and what we call humanitarian plus? You have seen and you heard that the humanitarian crisis is huge. Economic collapse is enormous. Humanitarian aid is not sufficient. This is why the main donors decided to find a way to use the part of the development funds, usually channeled through the government, for the support for what we call basic needs. And that's where we make a difference between humanitarian aid, which is clearly guided by the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, independence, crucial to safeguard of humanitarian staff, including women, towards humanitarian plus. The humanitarian plus, and it's the same for the American colleagues, it's it's aiming at resilience of local population, but it's also linked to a number of conditionalities. In the case of humanitarian aid is not conditional. We just reach the vulnerable. And this is why before even the Taliban take over, we were already operating in Taliban areas. It's important, and we really make the difference also with the Taliban when we try to discuss about the principle of independence and the rest. So these are the conditions for engagement with humanitarian. We have 5 principles: counterterrorism guarantees, respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms, inclusive government. You know very well that inclusive government means women, but also minorities and other groups that are very much under the scrutiny and the attacks of the Taliban. Humanitarian access and safe passage. Under safe passage, we also refer to letting people who want to be evacuated, who want to leave, out, give passport and have humanitarian corridors. On counterterrorism, I don't think I have to say anything, because I think it's one of the main, I would say, request also from the US government, and rightly so. And this is also why we keep also discussing with the Taliban. It's essential for all of us. But all this has some challenges. Obviously, it's not very, very easy to deal with such a huge situation, because on top of the fact that we have enormous needs, we also have a country under sanction. And I was wrong, I'm wrong, I shouldn't say a country. We have UN sanctions which are directed to the Taliban, to the persons, because you can have a whole country, a whole government, or person. So in the case of the Taliban, we have a number of ministers, or de facto or auto de facto declared ministers that are under the sanction regime of the UN. And we also have a problem in challenging the amounts that are needed. So when it comes to sanctions, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution providing for a humanitarian exemption to the sanction regime established by the resolution 1988. What does this mean? This means that at least all the activities that are aiming at providing humanitarian aid are not under sanction. This let us, main donors, free to support our partners, the UN and the NGOs, to help the people, again, of Afghanistan, not the government. The US has bilaterally issued general licenses enabling the provision of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. I have to say that we have been very grateful for that, and we are following the example of the US on this, and this is absolutely essential and courageous, because again, it's clear that we have to support the people and the country, because the collapse of the country can only bring anyway a spillover effect on a number of issues, starting from security, by the way. When it comes to humanitarian space, with the Taliban de facto in power in Afghanistan, it is key that humanitarian space is preserved, and you and other donors-funded humanitarian partners can work independently in the full respect of humanitarian principles and with the sole purpose of meeting the needs of the most vulnerable. So all donors must continue working to prevent any attempt of aid diversion or the Taliban to instrumentalize our aid. This is an important point. We had a long discussion this morning because on Sunday, the Taliban called in the UN agency, all the heads of the UN agency, and basically told them that they want to control what they do, when they do, and to whom they give the money. There was a strong reaction, of course, from the UN and also from us. And this is, of course, a red line. There's no way that they control or they tell us what to do or who to recruit or who is the beneficiary. We have to stand really strong against that. And this is what we are going to discuss also with the de facto authorities and the UN, us, and the main donors. So I don't want to talk for your country, but let's say we all see very much, we are very aligned on this. So let's see what happens. That's a news of 2 days ago. So we are now reacting and preparing something on that. But this is always a challenge. And to be honest, between us, it was a challenge often also during the previous regime, when they tried sometimes to tell us what to do. This crisis, as you probably know, is not limited to the country itself. The international support of Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asia countries is key to prevent issues in the fields of regional stability, security, and illegal migration. So, because now I have a cut here. And so we know that there are millions of Afghans that are in Pakistan, in Iran, and in other countries. Mainly it's Iran and Pakistan. And as international community, we've been supporting them in those countries, but the numbers are getting higher, not as high as we thought for the moment, but I fear that after spring, when the winter will stop, we'll let them is stopping them from moving, we might have an increase of refugees and people going. So that was about the displacement towards the region. And we have 3 million Afghans in Iran and in Pakistan. Again, for Iran, the US do not work in Iran, but we do finance a number of projects in Iran for the Afghan refugees. It is not easy, it's not every time achieved, but despite all this, I have to say the Iranian authorities at least give access to health education to all the Afghan refugees, which is already a step. But of course, the conversation is not every day very easy for our partners. So what is the way forward? We had, well, this is me with the Taliban here. We had, of course, the US had a number of meetings and talks in Doha. When it comes to the European Union, we had the first round of talks on 29 and 30 of November 2021. When we were there, we channeled the same message as the other main donors. We want the independence of humanitarian aid. We need female workers. We need the respect, of course, of girls, women. Girls have to go back to school, human rights, minorities, and all the basis of any kind of not cooperation, but certainly independence. Because they keep telling us in these talks that they agree, they understand that we are not going to channel anything through them, and they want to show that they are not corrupted, and they are going to let us free to do that. But this is if they don't let girls go to school, if they don't let other ethnic groups to participate, to the civil society, to the government, and you name it, and you know that we had some women kidnapped. They say, well, I'm not going too much into that, but let's say that there are different stories, and it's still a very hard talk. The last 23rd of January, for the first time, a Taliban delegation has been participating to meetings in Europe. There were Oslo talks. So Norway courageously, I have to say, hosted discussion on the humanitarian crisis, human rights, rights to education for girls and women, an inclusive government and liquidity crisis that the Taliban de facto authority, with the Taliban de facto authority. It was, again, very needed. All the people participating, including the US Special Envoy, Mr. Tom West, raised the issue of human rights, women's rights, and certainly dialogue is needed if we want at least to preserve the life and the freedom of the women of Afghanistan, the children. But that was, I would say, an important moment. I'm also sorry for being a little bit long. This is a very complex issue, but just to finish, after the 15th of August, as CODIGECO is my Directorate General, so it's Humanitarian Aid, provided a total of 222 million for Afghanistan. So there was, in a couple of months, that was what we put in the country, food security, health. We have our staff, international staff, by the way, we are mostly women. They are back in Kabul since September already, so our office is open, and we do monitor. We go around in the country and we do monitor projects ourselves, which is, I would say, quite rare. I think we are one of the few who reopen the office when it comes to that, and apart from, of course, the implementing agency, UN, and the others. NGOs have been very courageous. They never left, and they're still there, and they never left even during the crisis. That's the map of our activities. We also, as European Union, finance 10 flights, humanitarian flights with medicines and food items, but mainly medicines, because this is what is badly missing in the hospital and the health centers. Even basic, like aspirin, doesn't exist anymore. So we had already 10 flights since 29th of September. We are preparing 6 other flights. So we channel and we pay for the transport of medicine for NGOs and partners. We also stand ready, and we do operate when we have natural disasters. We did operate in Baghdad. There was an earthquake a few weeks ago. That's a photo from a colleague recently, and when he was there for a visit. So with all that, thank you. And I hope I gave an overview of our activities, but please let me know if you have any question. Thank you.